So we all identify as progressives here in San Francisco, and I'd like to know what that means, and I'd like each of our guests to say what they think that means for them. Nicole.
Sure. I think for me, the question in terms of defining a progressive is ultimately like, who is this city for? Whose city is this? And I think there's a lot of lines in the sand around that in terms of really figuring out, are we a city just for wealthy people or not? Are we a city that's committed to having a diversity on racial ethnic lines, low-income people, middle-class people, working people, or are we a city that only the wealthiest folks can afford to live in? And I really think when you look at policy decisions around housing, around job creation, around healthcare, around young people, all these things really come at answering that question. And that's the question I think we need to put to our elected officials. That's the question we need to put to each other. That's the question we need to put when we're deciding who is the public leadership of the city. Is the public leadership people who are willing to stand up against capitalism and are willing to stand up for those principles? Because, you know, we are a city that is a very, very wealthy city. But at the end of the day, we have to make public policy decisions around how we respond to that. And do we create situations that expand opportunities for people, or do we narrow opportunities? Do we create situations where who makes public decisions is expanded, who's involved in the discussion is expanded, so that you have people who are historically marginalized involved in deciding whose city this is, or do we shut out their voices? And those are the kinds of questions that I ask in terms of figuring out who I support, what policies I want to get involved in, and what people I'm willing to work for.
Okay, and Krissy,
yeah.
What does it mean to you?
That was great. Well, I think I agree with everything she said, actually. But I also think at this point, having just done a campaign, I feel like in order to be progressive, you have to do something about the situation as well. Mm-hmm. And what's the problem in this city a lot is that we are progressive, but by the very nature that we live in San Francisco. I mean, we have that kind of idea that people that live in San Francisco are progressive. San Francisco's progressive. And I think there is a history of having some of the most forward-thinking, cutting-edge ideas about social justice in the United States. But I think in many ways, there's been a collapse of the work ethic around taking social justice issues to heart and sort of putting your money where your mouth is and getting up in the morning and making a commitment every day to do something different. So I'm sort of interested in that dynamic right now.
And you went out and you ran for Congress. You did do something.
Thank you, but I'm concerned about all of us doing something at this point.
All right. Erika, what does it mean for you?
Well, certainly I agree with the ladies that have spoken so far. I mean, I think it's very important to be progressive, and I do think there is a difference between a progressive and a liberal. I think it's very interesting that here in San Francisco we have people like Nancy Pelosi that supposedly on the national scale are considered to be oh so progressive, and how could anybody be further left than Nancy Pelosi or San Francisco? It's almost like this negative stereotype, but if you look at certain issues, if you take, say, the Israel-Palestine conflict, for example, on issues like that, Nancy Pelosi could not be further to the right, but yet she's considered to be oh so progressive and oh so liberal. Who are these San Francisco radical wackos who are further to the left than Nancy Pelosi, and how dare anybody challenge her from the left? So I think that first of all, it's recognizing that there's certainly a difference between liberals and progressives, and it's also looking at the local issues like the other gals we're talking about today. It's it's like you see some liberals who they may say on the national level they don't support big business so much, but then on the local level they're like, oh, they're more than willing to give away the store to all the big businesses, saying, well, they're the ones that create the jobs, which I don't think is always entirely true. Certainly shipping a lot of jobs overseas. So I think it's taking that different kind of perspective, and I think as Nicole said, certainly who is this city for, who's allowed to live here, who's allowed to live and thrive and work in San Francisco. Also, like Krissy said, you got to get off your duff and do something about it. It's about a lot more than just sitting around and complaining. You got to get out in the streets and speak your mind.
Right. And I wanted, before we get to Natasha, I just do want to add that this is a live call-in show, and if you want to call in, the phone number is 621-4472. So you are invited to call in, 621-4472. Natasha.
Yeah, to me, a meaningful commitment to be progressive means being actively committed to social justice, which means being committed to really fighting oppression at all levels. And that means fighting for racial justice, fighting for economic justice, and really fighting to make sure that we're building power, seriously building power and shifting power to go to communities that have have been shut out and been marginalized for decades, for centuries in this country and in this city too.